Hi, I'm Joe Walensky, and I'm the program manager for ConveyUX, which is Seattle's annual user experience conference, and we're going into our 7th year, coming up March 11th, 12th, and 13th, and I have the fun job of talking to many of the speakers that will be at the event, and today I am talking with Hana Nagel. Hello, Hana. How are you doing today?
Good, Joe. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing pretty well, and as usual, I'm in the Blink UX offices on the Seattle waterfront. Where are you speaking to us from?
Coming to you from wintry Montreal.
Well, that sounds like a fun place to be. I always have a good time when I go there, and we're glad to have you coming across the continent to be able to visit with us. I thought a good place to start would be for you to talk a little bit about your background and the types of things that you're involved with now.
Sure. So right now I'm a lead UX researcher with SAP with the customer experience branch. So we make enterprise products for the e-commerce space. But I actually got my start working with nonprofits that were focused on delivering social impact. So I think I come into UX from this kind of systemic approach to change. And I had a pit stop along the way doing design mostly for the fintech area. So kind of bringing both of those backgrounds to my approach to UX research now.
And so what's a typical work day or work week like for you? What types of things you get involved in?
Yeah, I think that's something that differentiates enterprise UX research from maybe B2C UX research, is that we think a lot about systems and modeling kind of large-scale interactions, and then looking for what I would call the critical points there. So I do a lot of thinking and mapping out of all of the different frameworks and GUIs that someone might interact with or touch on as they go through a process, and then try and find those critical points where we want to focus our UX efforts, because of course we can't tackle, the full breadth of the complex interaction, but looking for where we can make the most impact.
And then I had just a question about UX within SAP. If you're able to talk about it, I was wondering how it's organized within such a large company. Does kind of every product area build their own group, or are there certain organization-wide initiatives about how user experience is set up?
So good question. Part of what my talk is going to be about. I would say that right now we're working towards figuring out how we can scale the availability of insights and enable people to really act on them. We have kind of a division between the availability of researchers. So there are some folks like me who have the official title of UX researcher, and we're embedded mostly within a product design team. So then we act as a kind of in-house consultancy for the areas, for the products in our org area. But I think across the organization, we probably have less than 80 named researchers, and we have 90,000 employees. So the amount of researchers to non-researchers is very high. So we have also a centralized group that can help people to get insights, and we also have kind of a design, what we call a design gate, which is a process you go through when making a new product where you do have to do user research, but that might be product owners or engineers that are doing the research and not necessarily a quote-unquote like official UX researcher. So figuring out how to scale that balance between doing research the right way and by a trained researcher, and then how can we enable people to get the insights they need and the skills that they need to get those insights without being a quote-unquote official UX researcher.
Well, since we're already talking about research at SAP, why don't we talk about your session? The title of that is Growing UX Research, or I'm sorry, the title is Turning Research Ripples into Waves, Growing UX Research Capacity in Complex Spaces. So tell us a little bit about how you came around to that topic and what we can expect to get from it.
Yeah, I came around to that topic through my own work at SAP, figuring out how we could scale the impact of research. And as I kind of devised a framework for scaling it, I realized that I was drawing a lot from my background in social impact programs. So looking at how you can create a framework for both social change and systems change, and how that is very similar to this kind of organizational behavior frameworks. And I kind of tended towards waves because I'm interested in, sustainable movements. And there's a specific kind of wave that like gathers energy from the waters around it. And then once it reaches the open waters, it's able to continue on in that energy without any wind or other waves coming into it. And I, in my mind, was kind of drawing this analogy between what does it take to sustain a movement, whether that's in society, like peace in the Middle East, or in your own organization. How can you grow something to scale and then enable it to self-sustain and move forward and impact the framework around it? So I hope that what people will get out of it is three main takeaways, which is how they can apply tools that are already in their toolbox, so to speak. So user research, systems thinking, and service design, which are things that as designers we touch on. And I want to reframe their approach to it through social change theory, so seeing how they can apply those tools to scale research in their own organizations.
Well, I think it's going to be a really interesting talk, and you've mentioned the aspect of social change a couple of times already since we've been talking, and you mentioned that that's an area that you're also involved with outside of work. So maybe talk to us a little bit about your activities.
Yeah, something that I've recently become more and more engaged with is finding actionable ways that we can increase diversity in tech. I think growing up, like on a personal note, I grew up in a very mixed race family. So there's never really anyone that looks like me that's like 12 different, ethnicities up in public spaces. And so it became very meaningful for me to see people like myself represented in different spaces. And as an adult, seeing how that plays out in these professional spaces when you're at conferences, you're listening to podcasts, and there are people who are positioned as, experts and impactful in their field, and being able to expand the range of voices that we deem as experts has become more important to me. And finding ways that we can act on that diversity. How can we, for example, encourage more underrepresented voices to actually get on stage or get on podcasts or teach workshops, etc. So one thing I'm involved with right now is actually doing UX design work for an initiative called Modern Leaders. So we have a website which is called Women in Color, and we present a framework and tools to enable people to, create those calls for proposal and apply for conferences, and also to enable conference organizers to reach out and find a pool of experts that they can bring in. And I'm also working on a series of kind of community calls around how we can actively engage with and increase diversity in tech.
Well, I think everyone appreciates your efforts in this. It's something that we're always thinking about, even just in developing our own conference in terms of how we look for a diverse representation of speakers to be part of our program. So I appreciate you also taking the time to talk with me a little bit today, and we'll look forward to seeing you in Seattle in a few months.
Thanks, Joe. I'm really excited.
All right. Thanks a lot, Hannah. Bye.